Now we see and hear it, accept and maintain it. May we unfold the meaning of the Tathagata's truth. Good morning everybody. Good to see everybody here in person and folks online, welcome. So today I want to share a little bit more about Dogen's fascicle Uji, being time. And I shared about this a couple weeks ago. So I want to recap just a little bit from that and then move a little bit ahead in this fascicle. And then bring in an opportunity for some discussion about the subject, Uji. And I recognize that not everybody was here when I did the first talk on this, so I think it's important to do just a little bit of a recap. So there's this saying in Uji. It's, first of all, I have to say, we have to be careful when we just take one excerpt from a fascicle of Dogen and say anything conclusive about it. We have to look at the whole thing in context. So I put this out there with reservation about any conclusions. But here's one of the statements I found really helpful, and thanks to Shinkyu here for pointing it out. The way the self arrays itself is the form of the entire world. Trying to get your mind wrapped around, right? The way the self arrays itself is the form of the entire world. And last time I made the point of connecting this particular statement. Now, I don't think Dogen was intending this, but I made the intention of connecting what he says here with this idea of an expanding universe, that the universe is expanding, that there's this thing called cosmogenesis, right? That the universe, cosmogenesis, what is it? The universe is not a place necessarily. It's not the backdrop of our existence. It's not a stage on which we perform our life. That's the usual way of thinking about the universe. It's like this backdrop. It's a stage. We get up on stage from our birth. We do something on the stage. We do our particular performance called our life. And then we die. We get removed from the stage. That's a general understanding of the universe. That's our general assumption. I want to say for most of us, that's our general assumption of how we see the universe in relation to our own lives. But cosmogenesis is different. It's saying that it's not this, there isn't this point at the beginning where the universe was created and now we're here, but rather that the universe is ongoing creativity even now. So one way to say this is that there's a direct link between the Big Bang happening then and in the present moment. Right? So I want to explore that a little deeper here, but Uji says each moment, Uji, what is Uji? U means being, Ji, time. So Dogen puts these two things that we tend to separate out. He makes it clear that these are not two. Right? Uji, U is being, right? The physicalness of our existence. And time, Uji. And he says, each moment is all being, right? So then again, he's putting together time and being, or matter. Right? Each moment is all being. Each moment is the entire world. Right? So I don't know about you, but when I read that, I feel just kind of collapse of collapse of my understanding of who I am. And he says further, reflect now whether any being or any world is left out of the present moment. We tend to have a very narrow view of this moment right now. And our senses can only go so far in understanding the present moment. We even collapse it down to, I don't know, well, maybe the word collapse isn't right here, but we tend to, particularly in meditation, it's what I'm feeling in my body, the physical sensations, it's my breathing. That's certainly part of the present moment, but that's a very collapsed understanding, a narrow view of the present moment. And our job in meditation is really to expand our sense of self beyond the physical sensations, beyond the breath, beyond the mental activity that we associate often with letting go of as part of meditation practice. That's just a small aspect of self, according to Dogen. Okay, so this is just a recap, an attempt at a recap. Let's go on to the next part of this fascicle. So this is going to just dig a little bit deeper into ideas of cosmogenesis and how they intersect with Uji. And keeping in mind that Dogen had no concept of cosmogenesis when he was in his time. I mean, we didn't know what we know now in terms of a universe that is expanding outward from a single point. We didn't know that. There's no way he could have known that. But yet, his way of thinking is in many ways very much in alignment with that kind of process, that the universe as an unfolding. So for us, one of our illnesses is that we tend to separate, or we view the past as separate from the present. Right? If I can say that, let me say that again. We view the past as separate from the present. And we can see that when we hear statements like the present is all there is. Right? It's as though the past doesn't even count. Whatever happened in the past is the past, we say. That was then, this is now. Right? We have all these statements in our culture that really tend to be dismissive of the past. And I'm not saying that we should but here's the problem. Our past actions burden us, and when we consider the past, we largely have unresolved issues or traumas that are based in the past. Dogen's not talking about the past in that way, though. All right? Our problem with the past is often that we have our own issues, personal issues that come up that bind us. Or we have some degree of trauma that's located in the past, either personal trauma or collective trauma. And that burdens us, and so we do what we do with pain. We want to run away from it. We want to distance ourselves from it in some way. And we do that with the past too. We don't want to look at it, and we tend to cut it off. It's okay, well, this is the present. That was the past. Can't we get over that? Just get over it, right? We're living in the present now. Live in the now, man. All right. So, but Dogen is coming from a different place. He's not coming from a place of past trauma, I don't think. Although you could make an argument for that, but I don't think he's coming from a place of trauma. He's coming from a place of liberation, healed from his own past trauma. So one of the ways I'm suggesting that we heal from our collective past trauma is by an understanding of what the Buddha called right view. And right view also could be thought of in terms of cosmogenesis. So let me say a little bit more. Dogen says, it's like having crossed over mountains and rivers, even though they still exist, I have always passed them and now I'm residing elsewhere. He doesn't say, he says, let me read the full text here. All right. An ordinary person, he says, who does not understand Buddha Dharma may hear the words, the time being, this way. Right? And here's what he says. It is like having crossed over rivers and climbed mountains. Even though the mountains and rivers still exist, I have already passed them and now reside in a jewel palace. Right? So this is a kind of statement of separation from the past. I did that. I had that experience back then. That was then. This is now. Now I live elsewhere. Right? But Dogen says it's not that simple. Right? How do we perceive the past? At the time the mountains were climbed and the rivers crossed, you were present. Time is not separate from you, and as you are present, time does not go away. As time is not marked by coming and going, the moments you climb the mountains is the time being right now. Right? What happened in the past is the time being right now. If time keeps coming and going, you are the time being right now. This is the meaning of the time being. Right? He says time flows. There's this quality of time. It flows. Today flows into tomorrow. Right? And the Buddha said this too. Our actions, he says, thoughts produce the world. Where does the created world come from? Where does the created world come from? It's a good question to ask today because we often assume it came from back then. But Buddha taught the created world comes from our thoughts, from our mind. Our mind creates the world. Our mind of today creates tomorrow. Right? If you want to know what your future holds, look at the present moment and see how your actions are, your thoughts are, your words are. That creates the world of tomorrow. Today flows in tomorrow. Today flows into yesterday. Today flows into yesterday. Yesterday flows into today. So that makes sense. To say that yesterday flows into today seems to make sense, right? Because we tend to think linearly, that there's this progression of yesterday, today, tomorrow, in a line like that. But he says, today flows into yesterday. The present affects the past. What we do now affects the past. We can change the past in the present. Today flows into today. Today flows into today. Tomorrow flows into tomorrow. Right? So he's just really playing with our sense of assumptions about time. And I want to suggest that here, cosmogenesis also can help us get a different sense of time as we know it. Let's think about this a little bit more. This concept of cosmogenesis. So if we take, this is what happened 100 years ago, 1924, Edwin Hubble. You guys heard of the Hubble telescope? right? We didn't know 100 years ago if there was just one galaxy. And Hubble looks through this most powerful telescope, finds out there's trillions of them. All right, that's a pretty mind-blowing realization for our culture. And not only does he see that there's trillions of galaxies, he also sees that they're expanding away from each other. And then a deduction is made that if they were expanding away from each other in time, they must have come from a common point. This is this idea of the Big Bang. So if you go back in time, the whole universe kind of takes, it's like a massive inflation of everything, and it comes back to a singularity, right? And then, okay, so then going forward from that singularity, you have an expansion. And other scientists, I think it was Stephen Hawking, he says, well, what if we played around with these equations to look at the expansion rate, right? Because scientists up to that point had determined that the universe is expanding at a particular rate. There's a particular speed. Now here this connects with our discussion about time, speed and time. There's a speed at which the universe is expanding. And he suggested that what happens if we change the equations just a little bit so that the speed was a little bit faster or a little bit slower, just less than 10 to the minus 20 or something. Anyways, if we just speed it up a fraction, if we just speed up the universe in these equations, if we just speed things up just a little bit. So in other words, if the universe were to expand just a tiny fraction of a second faster or slower than it presently goes, the universe would collapse. It wouldn't exist in the way that it does today. It would not have formed the galaxies. It would not have formed the stars. It would not have formed our bodies. Life would not have come about if the universe had expanded faster, just by a hair, or slower. And this brings us to a place of the deeper understanding of the middle way. Many of you understand the middle way, as I understand it too, as this place between extremes. The extremes of asceticism on one hand and indulgence on the other hand. The Buddha talked about that, and that was his kind of path to enlightenment, to finding this middle way. But if you read the deeper truth on the middle way, is that the middle way is this existence itself. And this is in alignment, actually, with this sense of speed. If you speed it up too much or slow it down just a little bit, life doesn't come into existence. We are living the middle way just by the fact of our existence. We are already living the middle way. You don't have to worry about being saved. You are, right? Just by the fact that you're alive. Furthermore, when we see these galaxies as coming back into a singular point, if we go all the way back to that point, time doesn't exist. Time only exists in the light of being. If there's no being, there is no time. So as the universe is expanding, time and being go together. The expansion rate and the matter, the physical matter of the universe, they go together. You can't have one without the other. There is no time separate from being in that regard. But what is our usual way of thinking? Our usual way of thinking is that Big Bang happened way back then, right? Yeah, that thing happened. That was an event that happened back then. It doesn't really have an effect on my life today. But the reality is, what we're seeing is that the Big Bang is actually, we're inside of it. We're inside of it. But what our minds tend to do in modern Western experience is to say, we're outside of the Big Bang and it happened back then. Right? We've pulled ourselves out from the universe, and as if we can observe it out there. It happened back then. But with this, what I'm trying to suggest is that we're actually embedded inside of it. We never left it. It's happening right now. And in the same way, Dogen says this, right? He says, reflect now whether any being or any world is left out of the present moment. Right? Reflect now whether any being or any moment, any world is left out of the present moment. So everything from the beginning is present right now. Dinosaurs, supernovas, atoms, the evolution of species. This is all continuing to happen. We're not done. Right? We're not done evolving. Can you see your spine related to other mammals? They're here too. They're inside of us. Without them, we wouldn't be. Right? So, I'd like to, well, I think I'll maybe just end there and see where you guys are with this. Thank you.
I have a thought. I'm hearing the kind of Shrivastavadan perspective, past, present, and future, all existing together. I've heard it like time is a flat circle, right? If you could zoom out of time, you would see the whole thing. They're all sort of connected, and that does have a sort of shifts when you look at things. Is that what you're getting at?
Right, yeah, there's some, I think there is some kind of shift in perspective that's necessary here for us, for modern people, in terms of how we perceive of time. Yeah. It's more circular rather than linear. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it seems like it makes you less want to remove pieces of the story. Like you're more likely to perceive things with a sort of wholeness.
Exactly.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of it we want to forget, or that we just, as a matter of habit, maybe forget.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's out of our consciousness. And then we do this other thing as well, where we don't see ourselves as connected or related to other species, for example, or even other, the elements of the natural world, the wind, the water, we don't see ourselves connected there because we've blocked that aspect of the self out. This is the consequence of that, yeah, this is the consequence of that kind of thinking.
I'll drop this. It was a little far out, but we're kind of in that space anyway. So there's a book Ishmael, this fella, has a conversation with a telepathic gorilla. But one of the ideas that they introduced was that humans are simply the first species to develop self-awareness, and every other species is on that journey. It's like they're going to arrive there. So like that's what the future holds, which is sort of similar to notice how the Diamond Sutra opens up as like all beings will eventually be led by me in the final state. Sort of
Yeah. I think there's some compatibility there. Yeah. So that affects, I mean, if we were to see other species in that light as approaching Buddhahood, just as humans, how would that affect our perception of them? I don't know.
Yeah, that is sort of radical. Like a cow's gonna wake up one day and realize what you had done to him.
Yeah. But yeah, well, it has to do with our sense of entitlement and the way that we see the world as a kind of commodity to be used for our gain as a species. And what if, so this is pointing to a radical shift in perception. What if we were to see things a little bit differently? That everything is how do we engage in a world like that? Because right now, as we are living, it's very hard to engage in this kind of world that has a sensitivity to the unique path of other species, right? How do we engage in that world from where we are right now? It's very, very challenge. It's a challenge. I'll just point at that. I haven't perfected that. I'm just pointing to the challenge of it. This is the challenge of Dogen. Like, how do we live in that particular world if our